Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Menopause Collective with me, your host, Sarah Utley. I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, who is Sarah Clein. Sarah's career in public sector spanned more than 2 decades, and she is now the founder of Wildflower Fire Coaching. In addition, Sarah is a counsellor and a writer, writing on topics relating to shame, burnout, and divorce, all of which is born out of her own life experience. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's lovely to be here.
How are you?
Yeah, really well. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, especially for a Friday with a slight migraine. So all good.
Hurrah.
Hurrah indeed. So I've got to start with your tagline on LinkedIn, which makes me chuckle every time I read it. And for those listeners and viewers who don't know, Sarah's tagline is working with knackered women. So can you tell us more about where Knackered Women was born out of?
So it's a really interesting question, that one, because it was something that came when I worked in the public sector. And I used to talk to other colleagues, and being a northern woman, it was a word that we used a lot to describe how we felt. And it was something that I always wanted to use in my work, but hung back from using for quite a long time because I felt it wasn't very professional. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've started to use it in a professional context. And oh my gosh, I think it's a Marmite term. I think some people love it, some people hate it, but the people who love it really love it. And I constantly get messages from people privately, and people say it publicly, saying, "You've named it, you've nailed it, and thank you for doing that."
So what is it that you're nailing?
I think I'm nailing that sense of being knackered, because as a midlife woman, at times, you're squeezed between lots of different priorities. So sometimes teenage kids or bringing up kids, sometimes maybe with parents that need a little bit of additional support, with trying to manage a job, a full-on job, perhaps doing a lot of the household stuff and life admin. And if I say to women, sometimes I'm knackered because I'm just managing all of the things in capital letters, people get it, and it really nails something about this time in life, I think.
And for those people that, as you said, it's Marmite, it resonates with some, it doesn't with others. The others that it doesn't resonate with, what are you hearing there? What does it bring up for them, the word knackered?
I think for some of the people who don't like it, I think it's because it makes them feel something about themselves that they perhaps don't want to feel or don't want to acknowledge. One of my colleagues, I remember when I used to talk about knackered and started to use it in a professional sense, said it makes me think of knacker's yard, and I find that really negative. And to be honest, that was my thought at the beginning when I was thinking about using it professionally. Would it appear like a negative thing that, you know, I'm not using a term that people would necessarily think is positive? But actually, I think I stand by it, because I think for the people who like it, it completely encapsulates how some people at midlife, some women, feel. And in fact, some men say they feel the same. But you know, my target group is women, female leaders in the public sector, and people who get it really get it. As I say, the people who don't get it, they think it's a bit negative, and it reminds them of, has other connotations that they don't want to think about.
And you write a lot about the highs and lows of your own career and your crash and burn.
Yeah.
And you described one role as having left you broken.
Yeah.
How has your career experiences intersected with your journey through menopause?
So I had my biggest job at the point when I entered perimenopause, but had no idea that that was what was happening to me. So I then went on to navigate an amicable divorce. I moved house, I left my career, and basically did something else. I did consultancy and then I did coaching. And my perimenopause journey and menopause has gone throughout all of that process of being in a big job. As you say, I've written about the fact that that actually broke me in the end, and then leaving my career, setting up my own business, and then navigating an amicable divorce. So there's a lot that's happened along the way from starting in perimenopause. But what I would say is I didn't realise at the time that that was what was happening to me.
And I think that's not uncommon for a lot of women to be experiencing broadly similar what you've described at the peak of their careers, in a busy leadership role, where things in their life are just changing. There's this undercurrent of, I don't feel connected, or I'm questioning what my purpose is, what my meaning is, and what I want from life. And that could be chemically triggered, or that could just be all of that life experience leading to that place. Yeah.
I think that for me, I started in the public sector when I was 21. So over 20 years later, as you highlighted at the beginning of your introduction, I did sit in the public sector, having done lots of different roles in lots of different types of organizations, and think, oh my goodness, what I know this sounds a bit highfalutin, I suppose, but what legacy am I leaving? What am I actually doing? Because I felt like I went through one organization after another, in one role after another. And yes, I'm sure I did do things that were valuable in those roles. I don't doubt it. But in terms of, as you've just articulated, something about purpose, and I suppose for me, something about legacy, I think I just started to lose sight of it. And I think there's something about that midlife point where I started to think, is this what I want to do for the rest of my career? Is this, as I sit on my deathbed, as we all, I guess, will do at some point, what do I want to have achieved in my life? And as you say, it's not uncommon, I think, for people at that point in life to start thinking, what's it all for?
So what do you know now about your journey through perimenopause that you wish you knew back then?
I think I wish at the time that journey started, I wish I'd known what it was, because I think at the time I was on a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and I started to experience things that I hadn't experienced before, which I managed in the background while doing that job, or doing, whatever job I was doing at the time. So things like, and I think it's really important to talk about this. So things like anxiety, where all of a sudden I would sit in meetings and be clocking where the exits were, not because of what was going on in the room, because of whatever was going on for me hormonally at the time, except I didn't know what was going on for me hormonally was due to perimenopause. I thought I was just going a bit mad, and that was very uncomfortable. And so I wish I'd known at the time that that's what was happening, and then I would have been able to do some of the research and perhaps have some of those conversations with medical people and my friends, of course, as well, and think, okay, it's normal and that's fine. Whereas at that time, I didn't know. I just thought I was going a bit mad.
I remember when you and I connected a couple of months ago, you told me that, and it resonates so much with my experience. In the last episode, I was talking about my social anxiety, and it really manifests in meetings, or manifested in meetings. And like you, I would either personally, I would try to avoid the scenario, because there was something about being in a meeting and everybody looking at me that triggered this fight or flight. And I really didn't understand why. It kind of came on like a flick of a switch. One day I was fine. The next day I, had a mini panic attack in the middle of a meeting. And that that fear of it happening again as well just kind of compounded it. So I would just sit there thinking, oh my God, it's happening again and again. And the more it happened again. And like you, I would look for any excuse to get out of it and try to minimize myself. And I genuinely, like you, thought I was going mad.
And I think it's really good that we're having this conversation, because my hope for it, excuse me, is that other people will listen to this that are perhaps at the starting point of their own journey, and they'll think, oh, thank God, it's normal. Because I didn't talk about it at the time. I was in the type of job where I put more lippy on, I put more concealer on, I probably put higher heels on, and I just got on with it. Inside, I was going through all sorts, but I just carried on because of the type of culture that I worked in. And this isn't unusual. It wasn't the done thing to talk about weakness. The done thing was to put your armor on and just get on with it. And so even the senior women that were around me, nobody else was talking about it either. So it's not as though I could say, oh, you know, I'm feeling a bit anxious in this meeting. I mean, it's just not the sort of thing that people would have talked about. Very similar, Sarah, and I don't know if this is your experience, to when I had children, was in a job. You know, I might have been up all night with a colicky baby. I would never have told anybody. I just put my even more concealer on and just cracked on with it.
Yeah, I haven't had children, so I don't have that same lived experience. But back in my corporate days, when I was going through this experience, nobody, as you said, talked about, no leader, no female leader showed up looking like me. I don't know that because they could have been having their own internal struggle and journey, but we never talked about it. I never felt I could talk about it because I always felt I had to be strong. I was in a role where I was giving solutions. I was a subject matter expert. People looked at me, and I did feel, you know, very judged because of that, or I feared being judged. But now, having had CBT and running my own coaching and going through my own coaching journey, I am quite happy to walk into a room now feeling broadly similar and say, you know, guys, feeling slightly anxious about certain aspects of this. So blah, blah, blah. I'm far more comfortable just talking about it because there's no shame in it. It's just who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that really resonates, actually. And I think for me, I'm much more comfortable now. I think to go back to that time, though, which I guess a lot of people watching or listening to this will be in that same sort of space where, and certainly in the place I was, or places I was, very male dominated, you know, and there was a sort of, how can I put it? As I say, it's like armor. You know, I put my armor on, I went in, I did what I had to do, and showing signs of weakness, or even, I know it sounds odd, showing signs of being a woman, you know, actually, in terms of a woman having some sort of weakness, and certainly a hormonal weakness in that way, it wouldn't have occurred to me to do it. It wouldn't have occurred to me to do it in that type of culture.
And putting that armor on every day, how did that show up in the rest of your life?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think I noticed it was showing up in the rest of my life to start with, but it was interesting, actually. I was talking to a best friend one day and we'd been very close for a long time and been through lots of different situations together. And I was telling her about someone else that I worked with and saying, oh gosh, you know, I can see, you know, she's quite brittle. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not being funny, Sarah, but, you know, actually, you're becoming the same. I don't know if you realize that. And I mean, talk about tough love. It was cruel to be kind, but once I heard that and started to think about it, I thought, yeah, I've started to get quite brittle and quite, yeah, just a bit hard-faced, I suppose. So that's how it showed in terms of with friendships. I got a bit more like that. I think I got quite stressed. I think I would spend the weekend recovering from being in work in order to get back into work on the Monday. I think work started to become quite all-encompassing. I wouldn't say that I didn't think about other things. I'm sure I did, but they were very much on the sidelines. So yes, it started to take up more and more of life, I would say.
So what was your breaking point then that pivoted you to do what you do now? You know, you've had a great career in the public sector. You've now got a great career in coaching. What was that point where you just thought, sod it, enough's enough? I'm knackered.
Well, what happened was I was doing a big job, and I loved that big job, and I put my heart and soul into the big job. And then the big job, like happens in so many organizations, basically the winds changed, the rules changed, the politics changed, and the big job was no longer mine. I'd been doing it on a secondment basis. And when it came to the end, they basically wanted me to go back to what I was doing. And the management of what I was doing previously had changed in a way that I wasn't prepared. And I wasn't prepared to go backwards. I'd done something really interesting and I wanted to carry on doing more of it. And so I basically just said, no, I'm not doing that. So, you know, I'll do something else, but I'm not doing that. And I'd got to the point in the organization where I'd realized that I couldn't lead with any integrity. I didn't believe in the organization. It was very toxic, patriarchal organization, and I couldn't lead with any integrity. And so I realized that I had to make a choice, which was to do something different. And I suppose follow my heart a bit. I don't really know what I mean by that, other than I wasn't able to be who I am and who I wanted to be as a leader in that organization, or actually in that type of organization, because I was always the one who would say the thing that actually you're not supposed to say, you know. And I remember people saying to me, you can't have too much integrity, you know. And it was said on numerous occasions, and I'm thinking, holy shit, we're in the public sector. If we can't have integrity in the public sector, then what on earth are we doing? And I felt and feel very strongly about that.
Yeah. It's it's a strange one when somebody questions your integrity and how much integrity you're meant to have. So what pivoted you towards coaching?
So I had trained originally as a counsellor when I was in my early 20s. And I had practiced as a counsellor for a while, and I was working full time at the same time. And it was just at the point where accreditation of counselling, very similar obviously to coaching now, was coming in. And I realised at the time that, you know, you either do it or you don't do it. I couldn't do it as a sort of add-on. So I decided to focus on my career instead. But I never lost that interest of working one-to-one with people and basically taking them on a journey. And so I did, obviously, through my career, work with people using a coaching style. From a management point of view, did a little bit of coaching training in my career. But it was when I came to leave that I had coaching and suddenly thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So a couple of years after leaving, I retrained as a coach. The rest is history. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love taking all of the experience I've ever had and using that in a coaching context with the women that I work with, and it is mainly women.
So we just broke up slightly there for anybody who's listening to this, but so you mainly work with women, and you write on one of your articles, and I notice it is in your branding as well. You've got a poppy as part of your branding. You write about tall poppy syndrome, which I was intrigued about. Can you tell us a little bit about this and what impact that has on women in their careers and their sense of self-worth?
Yeah, so The reason that the poppy is in there is because when I came back from maternity leave, so I'd had a fertility treatment and very luckily had become pregnant and had come back after maternity leave with my second child, and had been involved in one of those organisational shifts that happens, and had basically started doing some work in a new organisation because I'd got back to work and my boss had said, well, I don't have anything for you to do, you'll have to go and find yourself something to do. So I did, and I worked in this organisation and did some work, and it caused a little bit of difficulty because it was a transformation type of work that I was doing. And the type of difficulty that it caused led to a bullying situation. And I basically was in a situation where I was talking to a coach about this some time later. And she said, well, that's just tall poppy syndrome. And it really made sense because basically what she was saying was, you were doing something that was transformational, that was going to change the way that people worked. And, you know, no shit, they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want that transformation. So what they did was cut the legs out from underneath you. And it's sort of cutting down the tallest poppy, if you know what I mean. And it really made sense to me. And that situation, that bullying situation, that was a very public one, and quite difficult to manage at the time, it stuck with me. It stuck with me, that situation, and it had quite an impact on me. And so it was important for me to have the poppy in there for the tall poppy syndrome and the situation that I'd gone through, but also because the poppy then self-seeds everywhere. It grows in times of turmoil often, and on fields of bloodshed, but then it self-seeds everywhere, and it's a beautiful, if slightly fragile, but beautiful, resilient flower. And that's why the poppy is there.
Oh, that's lovely. Beautiful, resilient flower. And I also like to think through coaching that you not only help the person in front of you with their thinking and maybe change something that's holding them back in their life, but it's that ripple effect as well. And when you said self-seeding, it's like that poppy is dispersing their seeds, and it's a similar analogy through coaching. The work that you do, that we do with our clients, then has that ripple effect in terms of how they show up and behave with friends, with colleagues in their own life. Yeah.
And that's why I called the business Wildflower Fire, because, as I say, the idea of fire, which can raise everything to the ground and sort of, you know, can be seen to destroy something, actually the ashes on the ground that wildflowers can then come through are the things that nourish the ground. And as you say, wildflowers self-pollinate and they create more and more wildflowers, and that's the reason behind the brand.
Lovely. And you mentioned you work predominantly with women, and I know from previous conversations that some of those women don't come to talk primarily about menopause, but through conversations, it's that kind of theme that does come up for a lot of women. And it's generally accepted that menopause occurs at 51, although we know that that's not always the case. And at that general age, women are at the peak of their careers. Coincidentally, that is an age where the divorce rate is highest amongst women. And your work often focuses on relationships. You write a lot about your own relationships and others. In your opinion, what's happening psychologically at that point in a woman's life that can lead to the breakdown of relationships?
I think it probably is related to what I said before about the fact that I think midlife for women is often a time where they stand and say, is this it? You know, all these things that I've worked towards, is this it? Is this everything that I want? Is this the relationship I want to be in? And I think for lots of the women that I work with, it's a real time of reckoning. And as I say, setting the foundations for the future. And obviously for lots of people, that includes the relationship that they're in. I think if I think about my own experience, I got to the point where my child was 6, so it would have been 12 years till they were an adult, and I made that calculation, can I wait 12 years? And of course I couldn't wait 12 years, because it again, going back to the integrity thing, I couldn't live with any integrity at all, but certainly not for that length of time. And so I think for women, it's a time of reckoning. I also think, obviously, from a menopausal point of view, the change in estrogen, I think women generally start to maybe focus on themselves more. I wouldn't say they're less loving as such, but maybe less nurturing. Some of those nurturing hormones start to change. And I think women start to think and take stock, actually, and do that audit and think, okay, is this the body that I want? Do I need to do more to support my body into healthy old age? Is this the relationship that I want? Is this the career that I want? So yeah, I think it's a time of reckoning.
I agree. And I work with a number of women who, you know, come to me and describe feeling dislocated from their lives, and it spans pretty much every part and every aspect. And that's why as coaches, we coach the whole person, because they may come talking about something at work, but it's more than that. And that's what's so interesting about the menopause and when it occurs. There's so many other life events that happen in and around that time. It's unpicking all of those. That's interesting. You've met loads of people through your career and through coaching, and I'm curious to know who inspires you the most and why.
It's very difficult to choose just one person. I think that thinking about that question from an ancestral point of view, I'm Jewish. I don't practice, but I'm Jewish. My family, primary family, is Jewish. My great-grandparents came through very traumatic and difficult circumstances to be in this country and to raise their families in this country. And I think that ancestrally, there's a lot of difficult situations that women that have come before me, strong women, have brought their families up in less than ideal circumstances, financially, and you know, from a racism point of view, and all of those different situations. So I'd have to go back to my primary family to think about the people who inspire me. I think in terms of coaching from a career point of view, there are some amazing coaches that inspire me. Some of the coaches that set up gatherings of other coaches where we can learn together and be a tribe. It would be remiss of me not to mention where I trained, which is Barefoot, and Kim Morgan, who I've long admired. And so people like that, I think, are hugely inspiring. I think from a public sector point of view, there's a lot of strong women leaders in the public sector that inspire me hugely. And having watched their journeys through their careers, and watch them navigate reorganisations, difficult situations politically and otherwise, and also their own menopause, is hugely inspiring as well.
Thank you. I agree. Kim Morgan is incredibly inspirational from a coaching perspective, having also trained at Barefoot. It's the most wonderful experience.
Yeah.
So as our conversation comes to a close, what is your aspiration for the narrative around menopause moving forward?
I think my aspiration is that it is something that we routinely talk about in whatever setting we're in. So to talk about it in schools, you know, I've got 2 boys that are 12 and 14, and I talk to them about it. I talk to my 80-year-old dad about it. I'm sure he'd rather I didn't sometimes, because it's a conversation my mum and I have never had. And so I really think it's a conversation that I would like to hear and see and participate in the workplace, in schools, in society. And it's really heartening, I suppose. If I think my menopause started 7 years ago, at that point, it didn't feel like there was a lot of places to go. It didn't feel like it was very public and there was a very public dialogue around it. It feels like there is now. Now, it may be because I'm looking for it and therefore I find it, but it feels like it's much more publicly acknowledged, discussed, and I think that's brilliant, and long may it continue. And I hope that for women who are coming behind us in terms of their menopause journey, that they have people to talk to who can give them the heights, delights, and everything else around it. I think the other thing I would say is sometimes the dialogue and narrative around it is negative, and people get fixated on what they're losing. But actually, for me, it's been hugely liberating and a real time of growth and change, and for the women that I work with as well. Yes, there are some difficulties associated with it for some people at times, and sometimes very significant difficulties, but the opportunity to grow and change and I suppose be who you may have always wanted to be. I think for lots of women, it's a time when, as I said, it's a time of reckoning, and you really do evaluate and take stock. Who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? And who do I want to be doing it with?
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.